Today we're going to be talking about solar power and the products behind solar power. So in an earlier edition of Ask the Expert, we had Will White from Fluke, and we welcome back Will for a second time today. Hi, Will. Do you want to say hello to Design Spark?
Hey, everybody. It's good to be back.
Great. Will, thanks for joining us. It was a really interesting discussion that we had about solar power, for example, in our last Ask the Expert. But what I wanted to know more today is the products that sit behind either the installation and testing. So anybody who knows Fluke obviously knows that they are the world leaders in test and measurement, tried and tested products the world over. I've got a couple of Fluke products myself back at home. And I just want to talk about the aspects of your product range and how it's helping solar engineers, basically. But one of the areas I'd like to start first is dedicated products for the application engineer or the installer within the solar world. So could you just give me a little bit more about the dedicated tool, what they're measuring, what we're looking for, and how these add value?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Fluke's been in test and measurement 75 years now. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, so very excited. And we have gotten into tools specifically for the renewable energy industry, and we'll talk about the solar tools today. So the first one is right here. This is our solar multifunction tool, and it's the SMFT 1000. It conducts several different tests. The main one is IV curve tracing, which is a test that's specific to the solar industry to identify issues with solar modules and strings of solar modules. But it also includes several other tests designed around the IEC 62446-1 standard, which is for testing of solar arrays. So we've got insulation resistance testing. We can test the resistance between different parts of the array to make sure everything is bonded together on the mechanical side, all the non-current carrying metal parts there. We have a visual inspection checklist, so technicians can go through and say whether it passed or failed. We can test polarity. We can test open circuit voltage, short circuit current. It has a power function, so we can measure power on the DC side, power on the AC side, and then it will compare the two and calculate inverter efficiency. Insulation resistance testing, and it's a little different than our standard insulation resistance testers. This one is designed to work with PV circuits that have live voltage on them. So a little bit different type of a test made specifically for solar. We've got the IV curve tracing, which I talked about. Diode testing, it will test blocking diodes, bypass diodes, and surge protection devices. And then we have an auto test feature where you can designate which tests you want to do, and it will run through a sequence of tests, which makes it really easy to do those tests kind of in one shot. Then it also comes with the True Test software, which allows you to take the information from all the testing you've done, put it into the desktop software, and easily create reports that you can send out to third parties like asset owners and other O&M providers, things like that.
Great. That's quite a lot of functionality packed in there, which seems obviously, it's a dedicated tool.
Yeah.
But I don't think maybe the user of your products, like, for me back in the day, I use multimeters all the time, and a combination of clamp meters, power meters, insulation testers. This does really seem to be like the one product that if you're in this industry, you must have, or otherwise you're maybe rooting around for different tools and you're having to go through different setup routines. So in that respect, it's a problem solver, but it must be a time saver as well.
Absolutely, especially if you're doing the IEC testing. That list of tests that's required by the IEC, the SMFT 1000 will do all of them. So you can complete that. All the information is stored in the tool and then reported out. So there's no paper checklists, no transferring of data from paper to spreadsheets. So it makes it very simple. And having that all in the small tool, it follows our appliance testers, which our European customers are familiar with. So you hang it right on your chest there. You've got a color screen right on it, so you can see the information as you're taking the test. It's very easy to use.
Yeah, and just to recap, you mentioned the software there. So in terms of site evaluation and giving dedicated reports, again, with the owner of the site or the facilities manager, you can pass those reports over quite quickly. They can see the extent of the tests that you've done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And along with that, we have the IRR2, which is a Bluetooth irradiance sensor. So this measures the intensity of the sunlight. It will measure the temperature of the module. It will also record the tilt angle of the array and the compass orientation. And this will be offered as a separate device, so you can use it individually, but it comes with the multifunction tool as well. And that's needed when you're doing the IV curve tracing to take the environmental data. So that's our other main solar-specific tool.
Yeah, and I think we touched on that product on our last interview, if I remember correctly, because I was asking about where do you choose the best place to actually pitch up your solar arrays, for example. We mentioned the radiance meter back then. So those are specifically the kind of the dedicated tools that you'd recommend to installers, anybody who's interested in the maintenance of solar power, solar farms, etc. But I guess you must have a couple of the. If I think back to my days, I had my old workhorse multimeter it was a tried and tested one that I used to pull out of the bag every time I needed to do some measurements. So from Fluke's perspective, in terms of like the multimeter, being seen as the old faithful workhorse piece of equipment regularly used, are there any models that you would recommend for users within this industry?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, the multimeter is definitely still the workhorse of solar. Solar is essentially a specialty electrical field. So all that regular testing you do with a multimeter, you do in solar as well. The two models that I would recommend, and I have one of them here, this is the 87.5. This is a 1,000-volt rated multimeter, has all your standard multimeter features. What we're usually using multimeters for in solar is the AC and DC voltage testing, checking for polarity on the DC side. We measure continuity, especially for things like fuses. Mm-hmm. We can take temperature measurements with a lot of our multimeter models. We also do voltage testing when we're looking for ground faults. That's a specific problem on the DC side of solar, and you can use voltage measurements to identify ground fault locations. And then we also have another multimeter, the 289, which has a low ohms feature. And we use that very similar to the way we use the resistance testing on the SMFT 1000 to ensure that metal parts are bonded together. Yeah. So the 87.5, the 289 are the two models that we recommend most for multimeters in the solar industry. Those are both 1,000-volt rated. We will be coming out with a 1,500-volt rated multimeter here in the near future.
Oh, great. Fantastic. So that's multimeters, and, a good multimeter is worth its weight in gold, essentially, to anybody in this type of industry who need to make regular tests, but also, to verify, like you were saying there, it's quick verification with the multimeter, etc. One of the other products, that obviously very familiar. If you're using multimeters hand in hand, you're probably using a clamp meter somewhere along the line. So in terms of the solar activity, what is it that maybe the clamp meter can be put to use? Are we just measuring current, or are there other uses that you can expand on?
Yeah, absolutely. Clamp meters have always been my go-to meter in the solar industry. If you're going to carry 1 meter, a clamp meter is a great option. And obviously we are using clamp meters primarily to test current, but the nice thing about clamp meters is they also include a lot of the functions that multimeters have. So again, if you're going to carry 1 meter, a clamp meter is the go-to. And we've got several meters that we recommend for the solar industry. The first one is the 325. This is a 600-volt rated meter. We use them in residential systems here in the States. This one's got a lot of the features that the multimeters have, plus the clamp meter. It also has a kind of a unique feature in our clamp line. It has a dual current range, so it can measure current at low and high current ranges. And the benefit is at that low current range, it actually has higher accuracy. So in the solar industry, we're typically measuring somewhere between about 10 and 20 amps. So you get a bit better accuracy there at that low current rate. Our next meter here is the 378, and we also have a 377 and 376. These are the 1,000-volt rated clamp meters. This one has a volt sense, which is kind of a unique feature. It can measure AC current and voltage non-contact. So you just put the wire up in the little yellow section up here, and it will measure voltage and current at the same time. So kind of a unique feature there. And then finally, we have the 393 clamp meter. This is our 1,500 volt clamp meter. It's designed for use in the solar industry. We're using it a lot on utility scale projects. And a unique thing about it, and if I bring up the 378, you can see if you look at the jaws there, the jaw of the 393 is thinner and more pointed, and that's designed specifically to get into crowded electrical boxes like combiner boxes or inverter boxes. So yeah, clamp meter is a great option in the solar industry.
Great, fantastic. We mentioned things about earlier with the STM1000. You mentioned about some of the safety tests, for example. But as a kind of like a generalized approach to safety, we're thinking about things like insulation, leakage currents, overload conditions. And I guess those conditions will exist within the solar energy world as well. But are there any more specific conditions we need to be aware of? Are there any environments we need to be aware of? And if we were looking to maybe expand on another instrument, say for testing of safety insulation, what kind of recommendations would you give the user?
Well, if we're doing insulation resistance testing, we've got a couple options. The SMFT 1000 that we talked about earlier does insulation resistance testing, so we've got that built into the multifunction tool there. We also have our standard line of insulation resistance testers. This one's the 1587 FC, which has Fluke Connect. This will do all our insulation resistance testing up to 1,000-volt tests. Also, has a lot of multimeter functions in it as well, so you get kind of most of the functions you get in the standard multimeter plus the insulation resistance testing. So those are our kind of go-tos for insulation resistance testing. If we're doing current testing, obviously we're going to go to clamp meters. When you've got overload situations, hopefully our overcurrent protection devices have kicked in there, so we can measure continuity fuses, things like that. When you're looking at safety, another line of products that is really a great use case in solar is our thermal imaging cameras.
Okay.
That's something that is very often deployed in solar. It allows you to see issues that you wouldn't be able to see visually, and at a safe distance where you're not getting in and having to touch the equipment. We've got a whole line of thermal cameras, starting with our PTI 120, which is a small pocket camera. We've got the TIS 55 Plus, which is a handheld camera, and then our TI 480 Pro, which is the high end of the handheld cameras. And as you go up in models there, the resolution gets better, and as the resolution gets better, you get more features, but higher resolution allows you to stand further away from the hazard and still get a high quality image. So yeah, we're using thermal cameras to identify issues with modules and arrays. Really good application there to see things that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And then looking at electrical equipment, both to see hot connections that may indicate a high resistance connection, which of course, high resistance leads to heat, heat leads to fire, so we want to avoid that. And often we can't see those visually. And then on the other side, we can see cold connections as well, which may indicate that a fuse is blown or a circuit's not operating. So thermal imaging is really advantageous in the solar industry to see things that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Yeah. And I think the thing around thermal imagery is when everybody thinks about thermal imagery, they always think of something hot and not necessarily something cold, for example, like you just mentioned. But, thermal imagery is actually measuring heat energy, and whether it's hot or cold, it is irrespective. It will show you everything. And I think what you mentioned there is, certainly in terms of a very kind of like first good line of maybe defense or application to see things that could potentially be about to go wrong or have gone wrong quite quickly is definitely the use of thermal imagery cameras. So, over the years, I've had quite a lot of dealing with Fluke, working here at RS. Obviously you're one of our suppliers. You're bringing out regular products. It's no accident you're the world leaders in test and measurement. And I know that Fluke always have a lot of resources that are available for engineers. So in terms of, you spoke about obviously the software aspect of things there, but what other tools and resources have you got available for solar installation, for example?
Yeah, our go-to is our website. We have a specific landing page for solar, which is solar.fluke.com. You can find a lot of information there. We're developing more training specifically for the solar industry. We recently released a NABCEP-approved training course that goes over the tests and the tools that we use in the solar industry, and we'll be releasing more courses like that in the future. We've provided that course both in person at the NABCEP conference a couple months ago, and we have been doing it online as well. So check our website for more opportunities to take that course. And then we'll be releasing more training specifically around the solar products over the next few months. So we'll see some application videos of how to actually use the products in the field. So we'll be offering that as well.
Great. And if anybody's interested, we'll put the links below, and they can go and have a look at your dedicated site and access those tools, resources, and future information.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been great. I know it's been a quick conversation today, but I think you have given us quite a lot of good, positive information there about the products, your recommendations for people within this industry. And I'd love to have you on Design Spark again for a further Ask the Expert if you would like to join us for a third time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always great speaking with you, and I'm hoping your audience gets some good information out of it.